I have had like 10 different outfit changes, so hopefully this one sticks because tears are on the verge of being shed. Also, there are going to be more tears being shed on some of your guys' parts, because before we even get into today's video, I want to put a disclaimer that no, I did not read the Harry Potter series this month. I'm just as disappointed in myself as all of you guys are, but just know it will be read before the year's over. Just know that there will be a Harry Potter video coming out, but I just don't want to put pressure on it, and I know that you guys are going to be disappointed, and I'm very, very sorry, but I just would rather not put pressure on reading it in the middle of the month and then read it whenever I want to, than to read it and end up maybe hating it just because I felt forced to read it. With all of that being said, we're going to get into the books that I read this month. I'm pretty sure I read 6 or 7 books. I'm actually not too sure. I don't know if this month I was having a reading slump, a life slump, in the middle of a reading slump. I don't know if I was busy. I literally don't know what happened. But I just didn't read near as much as I thought I was going to this month, and I really can't put a finger on what's going on. But hopefully next month is better and we can hope for a better month next month. I read 7 books this month. A lot of them were disappointing. Let's talk about it. The very first book that we read this month was probably my most anticipated read of the month, for sure, but one of my like top 5 anticipated reads of the year. And this really let me down just in the scope of how high up on the pedestal that I already put the idea of this book inside of my head. The book wasn't bad, and I feel like in the video where I talked about this book, my emotions of 1, being sick and just being annoyed, and 2, just being kind of disappointed by the already like high expectations I had already had a precedented set in for the book. It's not a bad book, and I never wanted anyone to think that I was like, oh, this book is so bad, because I ended up rating it a 3 stars, which is not a bad rating. Guys, it's not a bad rating. Justice for the 3-star rating, because I said this I think like last month as well, that a 3-star is still a book that I absolutely would always recommend. And I can 100% see like why other people love it. It's just, it's not at the top of any of my reads. So let's break this down. This is a part of the Knock 'Em Out series by Lucy Score, which has Things We Never Got Over, Things We Hide from the Light, and then this was the 3rd and final installment of that series, which is Things We Left Behind. These are all kind of standalones. They're interconnected standalones. So I would 100% always tell you to start from Things We Left Behind, Things We Hide from the Light, and then go to this book. I don't recommend reading them out of order, because while they aren't about the same people, you still get glimpses of their story and things that happen that you need context with. So I would say read the whole entire series. This book is about Lucian and Sloane, and if you haven't read the series and you know nothing about the series, Lucian and Sloane are huge allusions. They are alluded to multiple times throughout both of the other books. There's always like this like just banter between them. Everybody around them is always talking about them and like kind of this past that they share, and they are just such like explosive enemies, but really they just like kind of can't stand each other. But you can feel the chemistry throughout the other books, and you can feel the draw to them and to each other. And the chemistry when reading them from an outsider's point of view throughout the other books was so strong that I was like, wow, I cannot wait for the book. Like, I just know it's probably honestly going to be the best in the series. And it wasn't. Honestly, it's weird because I would put this ahead of Things We Hide from the Light, but I rated that book higher than this one. I need to unpack that. I would put this over that one, so this is the 2nd best in the series, and I would probably put Things We Hide from the Light as the like my least favorite of the series, but none of them are bad books. My problem with this one is that I feel like we have already kind of built up the illusion of Lucian and Sloane, so when we're in their books, I would appreciate building upon them, and it just felt like everybody else's book, and then Lucy and Sloane are kind of talked about in the last like 30% of the book, like they should have been throughout the 100% of the book. Nash and Lena and Knox and Naomi, they're like other characters in the other books, and we're still talking about them in this book, talking about things going on, talking about wedding, and that's more of like something that maybe is like, yeah, a distant conversation, not a conversation that you spend like 3+ pages on, or like an epilogue, you know, like that's like an epilogue. And I just didn't get it. Also, there are 2 different subplots going on. Wait, no. kind of 3 different subplots going on that don't really have anything to do with Lucy and Sloane like becoming a couple. It has to do with like Sloane has like 2 different plot lines, Lucian has a different plot line. There's also like a past point of view going on in between all of this to kind of give you a glimpse into the history that they share together. And I would say probably 80% into the book is when we finally actually start focusing on Lucian and Sloane becoming a couple. But even that for me, like throughout the whole entire book, it felt purely physical. It never felt like they really cared about each other in that emotional way. And then all of a sudden, there's just this 180. There's no like precedent to it. There's no like, you can feel the sparks of the feelings that they're feeling for each other. It's just kind of like, yeah, we're gonna be together. That's just how it's gonna be. And there's just no, you know, like I couldn't buy into their chemistry. And it was so weird because how I had said earlier, how you could feel their chemistry in the other book, I felt none like in this book. Like their chemistry, it wasn't there, and it was just like annoying of them going back and forth. It just felt like it was put in there because that's kind of what you already have set up of them going back and forth in other books. It sounds wholly like negative and that I really didn't like the book. But that's just to explain to you guys, because even when like I put this rating on Goodreads, everybody was like, wow, I thought this was gonna be like a 5 stars for me. And that it's more just to explain why it wasn't a 5 stars, because I'm always gonna be honest, even if I love the author, which I love Lucy Score so much and I love her books, but I'm always gonna be honest, and I just didn't love this one. And also this book is like almost 600 pages. But of course, I love seeing the characters and I love the world and everything that this series is set in. And I did still like Lucian and Sloane. I found this book so entertaining. Like this book was so entertaining to me where I was never having a bad time reading the book. Anytime I had picked up the book, I was never having a bad time reading it. 3 stars. The next book that I read this month was The Long Game, and this was surprising not only to me, but to everybody else when I read this book, because if you guys know, Elena Armas is the author of The Spanish Love Deception, which was like an OG book talk book that people were absolutely obsessed with, and I mean like obsessed. And I read it and I hated it. Like I really did not like that book at all. And so I hadn't picked up another one of her books, and when this came out, everybody was talking about it and I was like, you know what? I'm always open to give somebody a second chance. So I picked this up and I gave it a 4 stars. I really, really enjoyed this book. This book is perfect for fall because there's literally even like a little fall festival that happens. It takes place in like a small town in North Carolina. Our main character, Adeline, she works for like a professional soccer league, and she's like kind of in the marketing and stuff like that, and this event happens and she gets sent off to this small town in North Carolina because her dad is the one that owns the company, and it's kind of like a media mess that she has started, and so he sends her off to North Carolina. I guess that's just the way that things are handled in business. I really don't know who am I to judge. Well, I am judging, so well, I'm not judging, I'm reviewing. Anyway, so she goes to the small town in North Carolina and she is basically put in charge of this soccer team. And she's like, okay, cool, I've already done this like basically my whole entire work career. I can totally do this. She doesn't know that the soccer team is of like 7, 8, and 9-year-old girls. And let me tell you this, I am not one for kids and books. I just feel like it's just unrealistic most times, and it's just kind of cringy because of how unrealistic they are. And so I just usually opt out of that. The kids in this book were so adorable, and she gets the help of a former professional soccer player that is living in this small town, and no one really like knows that he's living there, that he's like a professional soccer player, and they team up to help each other with this soccer team. And I just loved the way that the romance like came about. I loved the healing journey of both of them, and I just thought that the girls were so cute. Like the little girl team was so cute. I feel like that was just such a nice addition to the book, and I just had such a good time reading this book. It just felt like a breath of fresh air, and I really, really enjoyed it. And that's like the best thing ever, when you can really enjoy a book that you're reading. And I really liked the guy in this book. It was very good. I would 100% recommend you guys go read The Long Game. We have yet another disappointment this month, and that is The Brothers Hawthorne. So to explain what this is, because I feel like if you're like from an outsider's point of view, it could be a little bit confusing. The Brothers Hawthorne is not a part of the Inheritance Games trilogy. The Inheritance Games trilogy is standing on its own. Okay, it's over here on its own. The Inheritance Games the 3 books in the Inheritance Games, it's over here on its own. Okay, put that out of your mind. This is kind of like a companion novel series where it has the same exact characters. It just takes place with different people. That doesn't make sense. Same exact characters, just different point of views, because in the Inheritance Games, you're only getting Avery's point of view, and with The Brothers Hawthorne, you are getting just two brothers' point of views. I don't know if that will change later on in the series. That is like one of the biggest complaints and grievances that I feel that people have with this book, is that it's just from Jameson's and Grayson's point of view, and people would appreciate the other two brothers' point of view, which is 100% one of the things that I had an issue with. So this is about the same group of people, it's just told from their point of view, and it follows like different plot lines and storylines, has nothing to do with the original trilogy storylines. So it's basically kind of like a continuation of the stories, but you're just following the brothers. That's what it is. You're following Grayson and Jameson. They're going on like two completely different storylines, like they really have nothing to do with each other the whole entire book, just following them solving these two other little mysteries. I didn't like it. I gave it 3 stars, but I feel like that's just because I already like have love for these characters and I love the story, and it is such a fast read, because if you guys haven't read the Inheritance Games, they're such short chapters. They're so easy and fast to get through. Like, they're honestly, if you were needing, like in a slump, if you were needing a book to read, I would 100% go to one of Jennifer Lynn Barnes' books. So one of the things I liked was that we did get a little bit more into the scope of the romance, because if you guys don't know, in the Inheritance Games, there's a love triangle. And in this book, you see more of the romance, because I felt like in the Inheritance Games, we didn't get a lot of the romance in a weird way. Like, we knew that there were 2 guys that she liked, but I never felt like a romantic interest in them or like a spark. And in this book, I like that we got more of like a romantic aspect. However, it's weird because this is a YA series, and when it's told in this perspective, it feels like purely physical. It's like he keeps describing stuff about her body and like all of this stuff, and it was like weirdly physical, and I was like, okay, like at least I feel like you guys like each other in this book. I don't know. With their storylines, this is a thick book. Like when you look at it, it's a fairly thick book. 100% this book should have been a novella, or it could have been 2 different novellas of Grayson's novella and then Jameson's novella, because these storylines could have been wrapped up, I think, within like 150 pages, almost 500 pages long, and it was just entirely too long. Everything was just so dragged out, so many details that just weren't needed, and it was extremely repetitive. But then I read Lisa Jewell's None of This Is True, which is also interesting because this is another second chance author, because I read my first Lisa Jewell book, then She Was Gone, which is like one of her, I think it's like what she's kind of like infamous for, and I feel like she, from the 2 books that I've read from her, I feel like she writes more like dark thrillers. But the reason that I say that this is like a second chance author is because I read Then She Was Gone like 2 months ago, and I gave it 2 stars. I just really didn't enjoy it. I like guessed the plot twist, and it just kind of felt like sad. I don't know, I just didn't really enjoy it. So I was giving her a second chance because of Bestie Haley. She read this last month in August. She was talking about like how good it was and how interesting it was, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give this author a second chance. I'm always open to that. And so I did, and I ended up giving this book a 4.5 stars, which is very high for me for a thriller, because I am very harsh on thrillers. If you guys are new here, I'm harsh on books, period, but I'm also very harsh on thrillers. So this one was a pleasant surprise. We have Josie and Alex. Alex is the woman who runs this very successful podcast, who has a lot of guests on. She lives this very successful life, this very like picturesque life with her husband and kids. And then we have Josie. Josie comes across Alex's path when they are both in a restaurant one night celebrating their 45th birthday. It turns out that they are actually birthday twins, and so Josie finds this very interesting, and then they end up crossing paths later, and Josie proposes an idea to be on Alex's podcast and talk about kind of how they're birthday twins and something along these lines. And then as we get on further into the book, things start unraveling. You're kind of like second guessing pretty much everything in this book. It kind of gives unreliable narrator vibes a little bit. It is so good. The reason that it wasn't a 5, because originally when I finished this book, I was like, oh, it's a 5. But then I was like, no, there were times like at the very beginning of the book, which sometimes, especially in thriller, it takes a while to set up, and I was like, I just kind of don't want to pick it up right now, like I'm kind of bored. But then once I got into it, I finished it in one sitting. I did not get up off the couch. I was literally like, no, I can't do anything with my day until I finish this book. It was so good. It was dark and twisty, and what I mean with dark is like, for example, Then She Was Gone is about a woman who is looking for her daughter, and her daughter's been missing for very many years. So you can kind of imagine like how that would take dark twists and turns. Well, when you were learning about Josie's life, there's like a lot of dark twists and turns, and you're kind of like second guessing everything that you know, and you're putting these pieces of the puzzle together, and you're like, wait, I don't even know if that fits right, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just so good and you kind of don't know what to trust, what storyline to trust, who to trust. Something else that I really loved about this book, just the way it was written, it felt very different from Then She Was Gone when I read it. It felt like completely like a 180 in the writing, which I actually really enjoyed. Something that I liked was in some of like the beginning of the chapters, like in the beginning you find out that this is kind of being told through a Netflix documentary. And so we are like seeing where it's like camera pans to this character, the lighting is whatever, and it kind of does like a manuscript type of thing where you're reading from. And I really, really loved the way that those were written. It painted a picture in my head, and I've talked about multiple times that even though I feed into like my fantasies all the time, okay, like I can create things in my head that just don't exist. For some reason, when I'm reading, I cannot picture anything. So when an author has very descriptive writing and can really like put me there, I always appreciate it. And that definitely, through those depictions, I could 100% see it. And I could just, even like the house, the way they were living, the clothes, like everything, where it didn't feel over descriptive, but it felt descriptive enough to paint the picture in a beautiful way. And I just really, really enjoyed this book, and it was very thrilling, especially towards the end. And then I picked up Summer Sisters by Judy Blume, and this was a very surprising read for me as well, because not that I like didn't expect to love it, but I thought it would just kind of be like a nice fiction book to read while I was on the beach. And I literally wanted to cry at the end of this book. If you guys like Mary Jane and Firefly Lane, I would say it's a mix of those two books, because this book does take place in the 70s, so it reminds me of Mary Jane because it feels like a coming of age novel set in the 70s. But then it also reminds me of Firefly Lane because it is about two very close friends, and you're following them throughout years and years of their life, how their friendship has developed over these years and what friendship looks like as you get older, and lives change and people go down different paths. It was so good. There's something about books about friendship that are like this and like Firefly Lane that just speaks to me, because even just like the topic of friendship and how friendships work has always been so interesting to me. I don't know, just the topic of that. This book is about Caitlin and Vix, and basically you're following Vix throughout the whole entire book. You actually never get Caitlin's point of view, which I also think is a very interesting and very purposeful thing done. But you are following Vix throughout the whole entire book, and she meets Caitlin when she's in like 6th grade, 5th, 6th grade, somewhere around then, and Caitlin basically invites her to spend the summer with her. That was like what was funny to me, is because they pretty much never spoke before this. Like, Caitlin was very much kind of this entity in Vix's mind. She was a popular girl around the school, and they had never spoke before, and I kind of found it interesting that they had never spoken, and Caitlin just goes, hey, do you want to come to the Martha's Vineyard with me over the whole entire summer? Okay, like my parents would never let me, but that's interesting to see that Caitlin's did. So basically we were following Caitlin and Vix throughout all of these summers that they have together, starting from like 12 and going all the way up through their teenage years and even after college, and what their lives look like. And you're following Vix throughout her whole entire life, what her life looks like, what she struggles with even like family issues, friendships, relationships, jobs, like all of this stuff. This book also did remind me of an Ellen Hildebrand book, because if you've read Ellen Hildebrand book, how like everybody kind of gets a point of view, even if it's just like 3 chapters of their point of view and they're very short, but you kind of get some of their like inner monologue told via a third person. That's what this book does as well, and I really like that, because you do get kind of like an inside look into their minds and what they're thinking in the moment, but you don't spend too much time there. The reason that I really liked this book is just, one, the scenery too, like it being told over the summer. I was at the beach, I could really put myself there. It takes place at Martha's Vineyard in the 70s, and if you guys know me, I love books set in the 70s, 80s, 90s, because I love those eras so much. And so it felt very much, you could tell, the just era of the 70s, the artists that were described, the just, you know, scenery around you could just tell that you were there. But what's so interesting is just friendship as you grow older. So starting a friendship from being children into as you go into your teenage years, and people start to change, and kind of their morale starts to change, and kind of learning right from wrong, and trying to balance a friendship with somebody who's kind of different from you, who may come from like a different tax bracket, who may have different morals than you, navigating this different life, and kind of, you know, one may be like a wild child and the other is just kind of more like low key, and how your friendship looks when people start to change and you start to get older. It felt so realistic, especially going into adulthood, once they started going into being like adults, going to college, getting jobs, kind of living 2 completely different lives and still trying to hold on to this friendship, but maybe not because you really want to be friends with this person, but because you're so used to having them in your life and you kind of almost feel this debt towards this person of needing to keep up with them, like in a weird way, like you feel this connection to somebody forever because you have known them since you were a child. You feel comforted by reading a book when you are going through stuff because no one really talks about having a friend since, you know, you guys are children, and what those friendships start to look like as you get older. Because like this, like they start going to they go to the same school, they spend summers together, they're spending all these moments together, and then they start to get older and life takes them in completely different directions. And what does a friendship look like when that happens? And you don't really notice it when you're living through it. Like you don't really notice that this stuff is happening. But then sometimes books like this make you stop and think, because you're like, wait, this is very interesting, because I have friendships that I've had since I was a child, and like they have looked different when we started getting older, and you know, life takes you in different directions, whether that's jobs, whether that's college, whether that's moving away, whether that's just having different paths of life, and how those friendships look different because you don't spend all these moments together. I feel like I'm rambling about friendship, but that's literally what this book did to me. I gave it a strong 4. It was a strong 4 because I really enjoyed the book, and I really enjoyed the messaging and the thoughts that it provoked, but I didn't care too much about the characters. I kind of didn't like any of the characters, but it feels realistic because all of them do things at times that make you not like them, and it's just life. The final 2 books that I read this month were actually rereads, and that was ACOWAR and Court of Frost and Starlight. I fully annotated these this month. These are going to be in my full like ACOTAR rereading vlog, so I'm not going to spend really too much time speaking on these. Of course, this is a 5-star series for me. I just kind of wanted to reread and annotate these and take you guys along that journey. So that video should be up in the first like 2 weeks of October. It's not going to have a Court of Silver Flames in it. That's going to be a whole entire video on its own. But I just felt so comforted rereading this series and really going back and noticing some other details that I kind of skipped over. It's nice to go back and read that and kind of make the connections of what was alluded to that you didn't even notice and pick up on, and then to go back and reread it and see those things. It's just very comforting, and I just always feel great reading the ACOTAR series. Those are all of the books that I read in September. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video and enjoyed my little wrap up. I know that it wasn't a whole lot of new books that weren't in videos, and I'm sorry. I literally feel so bad about that. But I hope you guys found enjoyment out of this video nonetheless. Thank you guys so much for watching and continuing to watch me on my channel. You guys mean the absolute world to me, and I appreciate you for even clicking on today's video, let alone staying and hearing me say this to you right now. So I love you guys. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff that you guys know how to do, and I will see you guys when I see you. Peace.